"Get your filthy hands off that door. You people do not belong inside a federal court." The words hit like a whip. No warning, no hesitation, just the crack of authority slicing through the marble air of a Washington morning. Maya Jefferson did not flinch. The crowd froze. Phones lifted. One officer shoved her shoulder while another grabbed her wrist. The third, broad-shouldered, red-faced, veins standing at his neck, pressed a hand to her jaw as if he could hold her silence in place. The sound of shudders and gasps bled into one another until the courthouse steps became a stage built for humiliation. If this moment already burns your chest, keep watching. Because in less than 1 minute, everything you think you know about power, justice, and who truly commands this building will change forever. It was 8:45 a.m. Outside the United States Federal Court, the marble glowed pale under the overcast light. Tourists paused. Reporters waiting for a separate trial turned their lenses. 3 uniformed officers surrounded one woman in a scarlet coat, her arms folded, her eyes calm, her stance carved out of refusal. "Officer Miller, identification, now." She handed over a slim black folder embossed with the court's seal. He barely looked at it. "Nice print job," he said, mocking. The younger officer beside him chuckled. "Looks like a fake credential. You think she got it on the internet?" A murmur rolled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She must have done something." Another, softer voice answered, "She has not even spoken." Then Miller leaned in close. His hand rose, sudden, loud. The slap cracked against her face like a gunshot wrapped in echo. Gasps. Phones up. A woman near the steps cried out, "Hey, you cannot hit her." But Miller's voice boomed over it all. "She was resisting verification." Maya did not move, her chin lifted slightly, the mark on her cheek bright under the gray light. "You are done," he growled. She looked at him steady, unbroken, and said softly, "No, officer, you are." For a heartbeat, even the wind stopped. The red light of the security camera blinked once above the courthouse door. Inside, alarms shifted quietly from green to amber. Somewhere, in a glass-walled office 4 floors up, an assistant read a single word flashing on her screen. "Protocol Jefferson, 1 standby." And outside, in front of a watching nation, the woman they thought was nobody stood still, seconds away from taking the judge's seat. The marble steps of the United States Federal Court stretched wide like an altar to authority. Morning light slid across the columns, pale and cold, revealing every line of stone, every breath of power embedded in the building. People gathered not because they planned to, but because something in the air told them that history had shifted slightly out of place. Maya Jefferson stood at the center of it, tall, still, and deliberate. The red of her coat cut through the gray morning like a signal flare. Around her, police radios crackled, cameras blinked, and the murmur of the crowd rose and fell in uncertain rhythm. The slap had not been the loudest sound. The silence that followed it was. Officer Miller's hand still hovered in the air, unsure what to do next. He looked to his partners for affirmation. None came. One of them, Officer Blake, shifted his stance, his jaw tight but his eyes flickering toward the crowd. Someone was recording from the bottom of the steps. Someone else whispered, "She is not even fighting back." The courthouse doors loomed behind Maya, massive and carved with the seal of the Republic. Above them, the words "Equal justice under law" shimmered faintly in the light. The irony pressed down like weight. A gust of wind carried the faint scent of rain. Maya adjusted her stance slightly, her bag resting against her leg, her gaze never breaking. She did not look at the officers. She looked past them, through them, as if the real confrontation was not with the men in uniform, but with the system that had trained them to see her as a threat. Inside the building, the security feed captured everything. Each camera angle focused on the steps, the officers, the crowd, and the stillness of one woman who refused to play the part they had written for her. On the 4th floor, a security analyst paused his routine check and frowned. He recognized the face immediately. He leaned closer to the screen, his coffee forgotten. "Sir," he said into the intercom, "you need to look at this, right now." Down below, Officer Miller's voice cracked the air again. "You are obstructing justice," he barked. "Identify yourself properly or you will be detained." Maya's tone was calm, almost gentle. "I already did," she said. "You do not tell me how this works," Miller snapped. "No," she replied quietly. "You already showed me how it works." A wave of murmurs rippled across the crowd. The moment was no longer small. It was public, recorded, and unstoppable. A mother held her son closer. A college student whispered into her phone. They hit her. Right here. On the steps. Behind the officers, the courthouse security doors began to shift. A faint click. A light changing from green to yellow. The analyst upstairs had triggered the internal observation mode. Protocol Jefferson 1 was no longer on standby. It was active. Inside the building's marble halls, screens flickered to life. The chief clerk, an older man named Harold Pierce, looked at the footage and felt the blood drain from his face. "Oh God," he muttered. "That is her." He reached for the phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed the administrative line. Outside, Maya's calm presence felt unnatural, almost unreal. She blinked once, slowly. The red coat moved slightly in the wind. Every line of her posture spoke of control, not fear. Officer Blake whispered to Miller, "Sir, she might be someone important." Miller's eyes narrowed. "Not dressed like that, she is not." The words landed heavy. The crowd reacted. A few gasps, a few angry murmurs. A man in a gray suit near the back raised his voice. "That is profiling. You just said it out loud." Miller spun, pointing. "Step back, sir. This is a police matter." Maya spoke again, her tone still low but carrying like thunder under marble. "You said I do not belong here," she said. "Tell me, officer, what does belonging look like to you?" He hesitated. The question hung between them, unanswerable. A teenage girl near the edge of the crowd whispered, "She sounds like a lawyer." "And," her friend replied, "she sounds like someone who knows exactly what she is doing." Another camera flashed. Reporters were arriving now, pulled by the scent of conflict. The crowd grew. Someone shouted, "Let her go." Another shouted, "Name and badge number." Officer Blake's radio hissed, "Command to field. Confirm identity of detained party." Miller reached for the mic. "Unconfirmed. Possible fraudulent credentials." But before he could finish, the radio crackled again. "Negative. Confirmed. Hold your position. Repeat. Hold your position." Miller froze. The sound of his own name echoed faintly through the static. "Miller, step back." He turned, confused. "Who said that?" Maya did not answer. She looked toward the courthouse doors, which now stood slightly ajar. A man in a dark suit appeared in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried recognition. Inside, the chief clerk's voice carried through the security line. "Escort her inside immediately. That is Judge Jefferson." But outside, no one had moved yet. The officers stood rigid, trapped between obedience and disbelief. The crowd leaned forward, sensing a shift. Maya took one slow breath. "Do you hear that?" she said quietly. Miller frowned. "Hear what?" "The sound of your authority collapsing." The marble steps caught the wind again. Phones rose higher. The red coat flared once more against the pale stone, and in that single moment, half silence, half storm, the courthouse itself seemed to wake up. Security lights flickered. Doors unlocked. Screens recorded. What had begun as a confrontation now felt like a reckoning. And the woman they had struck without hesitation stood calm in the center of it, waiting for the law to remember her name. Before sunrise, Maya Jefferson had chosen every detail of how she would appear that morning. No judicial robe, no badge pinned to her lapel, no car with tinted windows or escort vehicle parked by the curb. Just a scarlet coat, dark jeans, and a simple leather folder. To anyone watching, she was another black woman walking into a courthouse that rarely welcomed her reflection in its marble. The disguise was not for vanity, it was for proof. She wanted to see how the system she had sworn to defend would treat her when it did not recognize her authority. She wanted to know if justice, stripped of her title, would still see her as human. At 6:30 a.m., she stood before her mirror in the quiet of her apartment. The city outside was still asleep, the streets slick with the night's rain. Her reflection looked back at her calm, unyielding, tired of polite tolerance. For 20 years, she had walked courtrooms across the nation, from Alabama to Illinois to Washington, arguing for the right of those who were told to wait for fairness. She had waited too. This morning was her experiment. She whispered to herself, "Let us see if they have changed." On her wrist, the smartwatch blinked once an encrypted channel connecting her to the Judicial Oversight Network. Her assistant, Alana Briggs, had tried to stop her the night before. "Ma'am, you cannot just walk in without protection," Alana had said over the phone. Maya's voice had been steady. "Protection is what they deny us first. That is exactly why I must. Now, standing on the courthouse steps, she could feel that choice tightening around her like armor. The officers who surrounded her had no idea she had been appointed to oversee the very judiciary branch that signed their oaths. The seal inside her folder was not decoration, it was federal authority. Yet, in their eyes, she was an intruder. Officer Miller barked again, demanding verification. He was sweating now, though the morning was cool. Officer Blake looked less certain with every passing minute. The third officer, Daniels, kept scanning the crowd, sensing that something larger was unfolding. Inside the courthouse, Chief Clerk Harold Pierce was on the phone with the presiding judge of the circuit. His voice trembled. "She told me she wanted to test the system, sir. I had no idea she meant today." On the fourth floor, Alana Briggs pressed her headset tighter. "Patch me through to security. Activate emergency recognition mode. She is in the field." The recognition software blinked to life. Maya Jefferson's federal ID photo filled the screen, paired with her title, Acting Federal Judge, Department of Constitutional Affairs. The system began flagging the incident across internal channels, time-stamped and logged. Outside, none of that was visible. All that the crowd saw was a black woman being accused, restrained, and mocked. All that they heard was the language of suspicion disguised as procedure. Maya's mind drifted back 15 years earlier, the first time she had entered a courthouse as an intern. She had worn her only black blazer and carried a folder twice her size. A white bailiff had stopped her at the door and said, "Delivery staff use the side entrance." She had smiled politely then, swallowed her words, and complied. That was the day she promised herself she would never mistake silence for peace again. The memory faded. The present roared back. A journalist from the local news station arrived, camera balanced on her shoulder. She began recording, narrating quietly into her microphone. A confrontation outside the federal courthouse appears to involve a woman claiming she was invited inside. Officers are refusing entry. The situation is escalating. Maya did not claim anything. She stood, hands visible, body still. Her calm seemed to provoke more than any argument could. Miller shouted to the reporter, "Turn that off. This is restricted property." The reporter replied, "It is a public sidewalk, officer." The crowd stirred. Words became tension. Tension became energy. Then Maya spoke, her voice cutting through everything. "Officer, you said this building represents justice." Miller nodded stiffly. "That is right." "Then what does your hand represent?" He blinked. For the first time, doubt cracked the surface of his authority. Blake stepped forward, whispering, "Sir, command just pinged us. They said her name is on an active roster." Miller snapped, "Impossible. She is dressed like a protester." Blake swallowed hard. "That protester is about to be your superior." The words hung in the air, barely louder than the hum of the crowd, but they reached her ears. Maya looked at the young officer and gave a small nod, not of thanks, but of acknowledgement. Someone had finally chosen to see. From behind the courthouse glass, Alana watched the live feed, her heart pounding. "Protocol Jefferson, one is engaged," she said into her mic. "Confirmed," replied the system's operator. "Every camera is recording. Every transmission is secure." On the ground, Maya turned slightly toward the building, catching her reflection in the courthouse door. For a fleeting second, she saw both versions of herself, the woman they dismissed and the judge they feared. The two selves aligned perfectly. She took one step closer to the door. Officer Miller's hand twitched toward his holster, a reflex born of assumption. The crowd gasped. Maya did not react. Her eyes stayed fixed on the inscription above the door. Equal justice under law. She spoke softly, but her words carried across the steps. "I am here to see if those words still mean anything." Inside, the automatic doors began to slide open. Security scanners reactivated. A low chime sounded from the entry gate, a tone reserved for high-clearance officials. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. And in that silence, the disguised woman who had come only to observe was about to remind the nation that law without equality is not law at all, it is theater. The marble reflected her next step like a mirror, marking the line between who she appeared to be and who she truly was. The courthouse plaza had become a pressure chamber, heat without temperature, noise without sound, tension without movement. The slap had already spread across a dozen phones, replaying in digital silence. Each clip showed the same thing, an officer's hand, a woman's stillness, a system revealing itself. Officer Miller straightened his collar as if to reclaim control. "This is your last warning," he barked. "Produce valid identification, or you will be detained." Maya Jefferson's voice was even, almost soft. "You already have it. You just refuse to see it," he scoffed. "Fake credentials are a felony." So is theft," she answered. "And you just took government property." The crowd shifted, whispering. Someone said, "She sounds like she knows the law." Another voice added, "She sounds like she is the law." Officer Blake hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should check." Miller cut him off with a glare. "You are not paid to think." But the young officer's eyes betrayed him. Doubt was a slow contagion, and it was spreading. A woman in a gray coat raised her phone higher. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Maya turned her head slightly, acknowledging the voice without answering. Her calm unnerved the officers more than shouting ever could. She was not playing their script. Miller stepped closer, his breath sharp with adrenaline. "Do you understand what is happening here?" "Yes," Maya said quietly. "I understand it better than you do." Her folder was still clutched in her hand, the federal seal catching the light. He reached for it, but she did not resist. She let him take it. He flipped it open, scanned the embossed lettering, and sneered. "Department of Constitutional Affairs?" "That is a good one," he said, waving it at the crowd. "Anyone can print a logo." He turned to Officer Blake. "Log it as evidence. She is under investigation for impersonation of a federal employee." Blake hesitated again. "Sir, that seal looks real," Miller snapped. "It looks expensive, that is all." The third officer, Daniels, shifted uneasily. "Sir, command has gone quiet on the radio." "What?" "I keep hearing static. No new orders since the last message." A ripple of confusion crossed Miller's face, quickly masked by irritation. "Then we proceed as we started. Control what you can see. Ignore the noise." The crowd was no longer ignoring anything. They were watching, filming, narrating in whispers. The energy was shifting. This was no longer a scene. It was evidence. Maya's voice slipped through the tension like a thread. "Officer Miller, I want you to look around you." He frowned. "Excuse me?" "Look around. Every camera here belongs to someone who no longer believes the story you are telling." He glanced, irritated, at the raised phones. "You think that makes you powerful?" he said. "No," she replied. "I think it makes you visible." For the first time, he stepped back. Just half a step, but enough for the crowd to notice. The air tasted different now, like metal, like rain, like reckoning. Behind them, the courthouse doors opened another inch. A figure in a dark suit was standing just inside, speaking urgently into a phone. His eyes locked on Maya. Inside the building, Chief Clerk Harold Pierce's voice cracked over the security channel. "Miller, do not touch her again. That woman outranks everyone on those steps." But the transmission never reached him. The radio in his ear was still dead, replaced by a faint hum of interference. The wind picked up, carrying the low murmur of the crowd upward through the columns. The sound made the marble seem alive. Maya looked at the officers, then at the people watching. "This is how it begins," she said quietly. "One person deciding another does not belong." Miller's jaw tightened. "You do not get to make speeches here." She tilted her head slightly. "Then you should not have given me a microphone." Another ripple through the crowd, half laughter, half disbelief. The tension cracked for just a second. A man near the front, his phone shaking, whispered, "She is not scared. She is teaching him." Then something unexpected. Officer Blake stepped forward. "Sir, please, we need to confirm her identity properly. She has not done anything wrong." Miller spun on him. "You are done talking. Step back or you will be written up." Blake's voice shook but did not stop. "You cannot arrest someone for existing." The words struck harder than the slap. They echoed off the courthouse stone. People turned. Phones zoomed in. Even Officer Daniels looked away from his commanding officer, unsure which side was the right one anymore. Miller's anger flared. "Enough of this." He grabbed Maya's wrist again. "You are coming with me." The instant his hand touched her, the courthouse alarm tone changed. A low pulse, electronic, deliberate. Inside, the security system overrode local control. Every door locked except one, the main entrance, directly behind her. A voice over the public intercom, calm and genderless, announced, "Federal override confirmed. Access granted to Judge Maya Jefferson." The words rolled across the plaza like thunder. The crowd gasped. Cameras trembled. Miller's grip faltered. Maya turned slowly, her eyes level with his. "You just detained your superior, officer. That is not obstruction anymore. That is contempt." He stumbled backward, muttering, "That cannot be true." But the evidence glowed above them. The security screen mounted by the door now displayed her photograph, her title, her clearance level. The crowd erupted, voices rising, disbelief turning to fury. Some shouted at the officers, others cheered, and some simply stared, trying to process the reversal of power. Maya lifted her folder from his hand without force. "You took what was mine," she said quietly. "Now you will return what is yours, your accountability." The wind caught her coat, and for a moment it looked like a judicial robe. Phones flashed, the marble gleamed. The law, for the first time that morning, felt awake. And the spark that had started with one insult had just ignited a fire the entire nation would see before noon. For a heartbeat, the plaza held its breath. The words Judge Maya Jefferson glowed on the security screen, pulsing like a warning flare. Every phone, every pair of eyes, was now locked on her. Yet she did not move. Her stillness was heavier than sound. Officer Miller's hand slipped from her wrist as if it had burned him. He stammered, that cannot be right." But even as he spoke, the digital voice repeated the confirmation. Federal override confirmed. Access granted to Judge Maya Jefferson. The crowd reacted in waves. Gasps first, then whispers, then the audible shift of people realizing they had just witnessed something irreversible. A woman near the steps said, "They hit a federal judge." A man beside her whispered back, "They are finished." Maya did not speak. Her hand rose slowly to touch her cheek, the one that still stung from the slap. The pain was distant, almost abstract, but it opened a door inside her that she had kept closed for too long. Behind her eyes, memory began to replay itself in the coldest clarity. 15 years earlier, she had been 23, a first-year law student in Charlotte. It was a humid afternoon, the kind that made the air feel thick enough to drink. She had gone to the Crescent Hotel to meet a visiting lecturer who had offered mentorship. She had worn her best clothes, pressed white blouse, black skirt, second-hand heels. She had arrived early, clutching a folder of handwritten notes. When she entered the lobby, the concierge had looked her up and down before speaking. "Deliveries use the side door," the woman had said flatly. "I am not a delivery person," Maya had replied. "I am here for a meeting." "With who?" "Judge Helena Grant." The woman's face had twisted, half disbelief, half offense. "You cannot wait in here," she had said, gesturing toward the exit. "Guests only." Maya had tried to explain, but before she could, a security guard appeared. He did not ask questions. He simply guided her by the elbow back toward the street. The embarrassment had burned hotter than the summer Sunday. She remembered the stares of other guests, polite and silent, pretending not to see. She had waited outside for 45 minutes, her folder clutched tight. When Judge Grant finally arrived and saw her standing on the sidewalk, she had looked horrified. "Why are you out here?" she had demanded. Maya had only said, "They told me to wait." That was the day she learned what silence costs. It was also the day she decided she would never wait again. The memory faded like a tide pulling back, leaving the present sharper and colder. The marble beneath her feet, the weight of eyes on her, the echo of authority that had once dismissed her, it was all the same story, only on a grander stage. Miller's voice dragged her back to now. This must be a mistake," he muttered. "She never identified herself." Maya turned her gaze to him, steady and quiet. "You never asked." Behind her, the courthouse doors fully opened. 2 security officers in dark suits emerged, their expressions unreadable. One of them spoke into his earpiece. Judge Jefferson confirmed. "Begin containment protocol for unauthorized force." Miller took a step back. The authority that had filled his voice minutes ago was gone. He looked small, like a man standing in the debris of his own arrogance. The crowd was no longer whispering. They were filming openly, speaking names, narrating events. A teenager near the front shouted, "She is the judge! You hit a judge!" The phrase spread like wildfire. Maya finally spoke again, her tone calm but cutting. "Do you remember the words above that door, officer?" Miller blinked. "What?" "Equal justice under law." She gestured toward the inscription carved into the stone above them. "You made them a lie today." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The red light from the security camera glowed brighter, catching the sweat on his forehead. She continued, her voice carrying with deliberate clarity. You thought authority gave you power. It does not. It gives you responsibility. The second security officer stepped forward, speaking firmly. Ma'am, the Chief Justice requests your immediate presence inside. Maya nodded once, then turned back to the crowd. I will be inside shortly. Her eyes swept across the sea of faces, angry, curious, ashamed, inspired. She saw herself reflected in them all. The young woman who had once been told to wait outside, now standing at the threshold of the nation's law. Officer Blake, who had said almost nothing since the reveal, took a step forward. His voice was low but sincere. Judge Jefferson, I did not know. She met his eyes. That is the problem, officer. You never ask who we are before deciding what we are. He nodded, silent. Behind him, Miller sank onto the steps, his posture collapsing under the weight of what he had done. His hand trembled slightly as he tried to radio his supervisor, but the channel remained dead. The same security feed that had caught the slap was now being streamed directly to the federal judiciary's ethics committee. The footage would circulate before the hour was over. Maya turned toward the open doors. The marble threshold glowed faintly under the morning light. Every step she took now sounded different, measured, resolute, unafraid. As she crossed into the courthouse, the crowd fell silent again, phones lowered. Even the air felt reverent, like it understood what had just shifted. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. The scent of polished stone and old paper filled her lungs. She had stood outside this system her entire life. Now it was time to stand within it on her own terms. Inside the lobby, her assistant Alana Briggs rushed forward, eyes wide with relief. Judge, we saw everything. Maya's answer was simple. Then record everything. Outside, the crowd began to chant her name, not out of fandom, but out of recognition. They had seen justice insulted, and they had seen it stand tall. Maya looked back once through the glass doors at the officers, the marble, the crowd. The past and the present had finally met on those steps, and in that quiet moment before she entered the courtroom, she whispered to herself, no more waiting. The courthouse lobby was silent except for the rhythmic hum of security monitors. Each screen replayed the scene from outside, the slap, the stillness, the reveal. On one monitor, Maya Jefferson's face filled the frame, composed, unreadable, framed by the crimson of her coat. On another, the crowd's voices had turned into a low chant. It was not chaos. It was awakening. Inside, she stood just beyond the metal detector, surrounded by marble pillars and the faint scent of paper and polish. Every step she took echoed like a gavel strike. The two internal security officers followed at a respectful distance. They knew who she was now. Everyone did. But the knowledge carried a new weight, fear, respect, uncertainty, all tangled together. Alana Briggs hurried toward her, tablet in hand, voice trembling between protocol and emotion. Judge Jefferson, command confirmed. The footage has already reached the Judicial Ethics Division. News outlets are starting to request access. Maya stopped. Let them wait, she said evenly. Justice is not a headline. It is evidence. Her tone left no space for debate. She continued walking toward the grand hall, where the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor ahead. A group of uniformed officers appeared different department, higher rank. Their badges gleamed gold under the chandeliers. At their center stood Captain Ross Heller, head of courthouse security, a man known for his precision and control. Judge Jefferson, he began formally, on behalf of this institution, I extend a full apology for the incident outside. Maya studied him, her gaze sharp but measured. An apology is a start, Captain. Accountability is the conclusion. Do you have the names of the officers who made contact? Yes, ma'am. Officers Miller, Blake, and Daniels. They have been detained for questioning by internal affairs. Not detained, she corrected. Protected. From themselves. The crowd outside is angry. He nodded once, acknowledging the truth in her words. Yes, ma'am. We are managing the perimeter. Behind him, a handful of clerks and junior staff had gathered, whispering among themselves. They had watched everything unfold on the security feeds. Their eyes flicked between admiration and unease. None of them had ever seen the law itself look so human. Maya turned slightly to face them. You have seen what happens when assumption replaces procedure. You have seen what happens when power forgets restraint. Remember this moment not for me, but for whoever stands where I stood. The youngest clerk, a Latina woman named Elena Ruiz, nodded with visible emotion. She had been the first to recognize Maya's name on the roster earlier that morning. "Judge Jefferson," she said softly. "I tried to tell them. I said your name was on the docket." Maya met her eyes and gave a small, approving nod. "And you will never need to apologize for doing what is right." Elena swallowed hard, tears forming but held back. The acknowledgement meant more than any commendation could. Captain Heller cleared his throat. "Judge, the Chief Justice is waiting in chambers. He insists on speaking with you immediately." Maya's expression remained calm. "He will wait another 5 minutes. I need to address the people outside first." Heller frowned. "That might not be safe." "Safety is not the point," she replied. "Visibility is." The captain hesitated, then stepped aside. "Understood, ma'am." Alana followed close behind as Maya moved toward the front entrance again. The heavy glass doors still stood open, guarded by 2 new officers who looked nervous under the weight of their assignment. Beyond them, the crowd had doubled in size. Reporters lined the sidewalks, microphones raised. The public wanted her words. Maya paused just before stepping outside, letting the cool air wash over her. The chant had softened now, not hostile but reverent. "Judge Jefferson, justice for all." The rhythm of it moved through the plaza like a heartbeat. She stepped forward, one measured stride onto the top step. The crowd quieted on instinct. Cameras turned, red lights blinking like a constellation. Her voice carried, low but clear. This morning, 3 officers followed a procedure they believed was policy. They saw a black woman without a badge and assumed she did not belong. They were wrong. She let the words hang for a full breath before continuing. "What happened here is not new. It is not rare. It is only recorded this time. But justice must not depend on a camera to exist. It must depend on conscience." A woman in the crowd shouted, "They should be fired." Maya shook her head slowly. "They should be educated, disciplined, and remembered. What they did was wrong, but what we do next decides whether it changes." Her calm command stilled the crowd. Reporters leaned forward, microphones trembling. The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of her voice down the marble corridor behind her. Inside, Captain Heller listened through the intercom, watching the live feed. "She is controlling the entire crowd," one officer whispered in awe, without raising her voice. Maya took a breath, her gaze sweeping over the people gathered before her. The law does not wear a color. It does not kneel to uniforms or reputations. It listens, and today, it will listen again. The applause that followed was not wild, it was solemn. The kind that came from understanding rather than excitement. The kind that carried respect, not spectacle. Maya turned, stepping back inside as calmly as she had stepped out. "Alana," she said softly, "schedule an emergency inquiry for this afternoon. I want every department head present." "Yes, Judge Jefferson." Captain Heller met her halfway down the corridor. "That was extraordinary." She looked at him, unblinking. "It was necessary." He nodded. "The Chief Justice will see you now." She replied, "Then let him see clearly." As she walked toward the chamber doors, the monitors still played the footage from earlier: the slap, the silence, the revelation. But now, the narrative had changed. The wave of doubt that had begun in the eyes of one young officer was spreading far beyond the courthouse. It was moving through every screen, every phone, every person who had ever wondered what justice looked like when it finally opened its eyes. And it looked like her. The chamber of the Chief Justice was a room built for intimidation. Everything inside it was meant to echo authority: the height of the ceiling, the mahogany table polished to a mirror, the flag draped perfectly in the corner, and the endless portraits of men who believed they had defined justice. Yet when Maya Jefferson entered, the silence in that room felt smaller than her presence. Chief Justice Raymond Cole sat behind his desk, fingers pressed together beneath his chin. His silver hair was immaculate, but his eyes betrayed fatigue and fear. The 2 aides standing beside him did not look directly at Maya. They watched the floor as if it might give them an exit. "Judge Jefferson," Cole began, his voice formal but cautious, "you have placed this institution under an unbearable spotlight. I hope you understand the magnitude of that." Maya stopped a few feet from the desk. "The magnitude came from the slap, not from my response." He exhaled through his nose. "I watched the footage. It is already spreading online. Every news outlet is looping the same clip. You must issue a public statement before this escalates." "I already did," she said evenly. "Outside, on the steps. I said exactly what the public needed to hear." Cole frowned. You told them to remember the officers. That may be interpreted as leniency. She met his eyes without blinking. It was not leniency, it was leadership. I will not turn justice into revenge theater. That is how we got here. Huh. The Chief Justice leaned back, rubbing his temples. You could have identified yourself earlier, Maya. Her voice stayed calm, deliberate. If I had, nothing would have changed. They would have apologized politely, escorted me inside, and kept treating the next person exactly the same. This way, the country saw what justice looks like without privilege attached to its name. Cole sighed, glancing at his aides. Leave us. The aides hesitated, then quietly exited. The heavy door closed behind them. He stood, walking toward the tall window that overlooked Constitution Avenue. From up here, the crowd outside looked like an ocean of movement and light. Reporters, officers, citizens all gathered because of one moment that had ripped the mask off the system. You have to understand, Jefferson, he said, his tone softening. The media will devour this. The opposition will turn it political. They will say you provoked the officers. She did not move. Let them. They have been saying that about people like me for 400 years. Cole turned sharply. Do not make this about race. Her reply came like a strike of lightning. It became about race the moment they decided my skin was evidence. He froze. The words hung heavy in the air. Outside, the muffled sound of chanting rose again. Equal justice under law, Maya continued, voice steady. I did not come here to embarrass this court. I came here to reveal it. The public must see that justice is not immune from correction. Cole returned to his seat, defeated by her composure. And what do you propose we do now? She placed her folder on his desk. Inside were printed still frames from the security footage, every angle of the incident, time-stamped and authenticated. We begin with the truth. This recording will become official evidence, not for a spectacle, but for reform. I will convene an open inquiry this afternoon. He looked at her. That is not how things are done here. She met his gaze. Then we will do them differently. The Chief Justice's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. You are forcing the system to look in a mirror it does not want to face. Then it is long overdue. The intercom on his desk crackled. Alana Briggs' voice came through, calm but urgent. Judge Jefferson, the press has gathered outside. They are asking for official confirmation of your position. Oh, Maya answered. Tell them to look at the footage. It confirms everything. Cole closed his eyes, rubbing his forehead. Maya, listen to me. This moment will define your career. It will define mine, too. If you proceed with a public inquiry, you will have enemies on every side. She leaned forward slightly, her tone quiet but unshakable. Justice does not need friends, Chief. It needs witnesses. He stared at her, realizing the conversation was already over. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Do you know what frightens me the most, sir? He shook his head. That I could have stayed silent and nothing would have changed. When she stepped out, Alana was waiting. Judge, the first independent recording of the incident has just been uploaded. A college student named Jenna Wright was streaming live. The clip already has over 1 million views. Maya nodded, her stride never breaking. Then the world is watching. Let them see what we do next. They walked down the long corridor, past portraits of judges who had never faced such scrutiny. Each step echoed against the marble walls, carrying the weight of history in motion. Outside, the sound of chanting grew louder, filling the air through the glass doors. Reporters shouted her name, microphones raised, lights flashing like lightning strikes. Maya stopped just before the exit. She turned to Alana. Set up a live broadcast for the inquiry at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I want every voice recorded, every fact documented, every witness sworn under oath. Yes, Judge Jefferson, Alana said firmly. Maya looked toward the crowd beyond the glass, the sea of phones and banners reflecting in her eyes. Today, the people are the jury, she said softly. Then she stepped through the doors again, into the light, where justice had waited too long to speak. And the first recording that had started this entire storm continued to play across every screen in the country, each replay not just proof of violence, but proof that silence was no longer an option. By the time the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, the courthouse had turned into the center of a storm. The plaza outside was packed shoulder to shoulder. Television vans lined the avenue, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like silver trees. Inside, The marble halls glowed under the harsh light of camera crews, setting up for the live broadcast of the inquiry Judge Maya Jefferson had ordered. Every corridor hummed with movement staff whispering into radios, officers repositioning barricades, reporters clutching notebooks filled with questions they were too afraid to ask aloud. It was not just another case. It was an autopsy of the system itself, happening in real time. Maya walked through it all with the same calm precision that had unnerved her detractors and inspired her supporters. The red coat had been replaced by a black robe now, its folds trailing like shadows across the polished floor. Her presence was quiet but gravitational. Wherever she passed, conversation stopped. In the press gallery, young clerks and interns sat behind the glass panels, watching through the transparent wall. Among them was Elena Ruiz, the clerk who had first recognized Maya's name that morning. Her hands were clasped tightly on the desk in front of her, knuckles white. She had replayed the moment in her head all day, the way the officers had laughed, the way her voice had almost cracked when she said, "Her name is in the system," and the way they had ignored her. Now, as she watched Maya prepare to speak before the inquiry, Elena felt the full weight of that silence pressing on her chest. Maya stopped near the witness podium, where microphones waited. Captain Ross Heller stood beside her, briefing her on the logistics. "The internal affairs representatives will join remotely," he said. "We have verified all security footage. Every clip has been authenticated and time-stamped. The recordings from the bystanders match the courthouse surveillance feed perfectly." "Good," Maya said. "No edits, no commentary, just truth." He nodded, then hesitated. "Judge, there is something else. One of the clerks has asked to testify voluntarily." "Who?" "Elena Ruiz. She claims she tried to intervene before the altercation escalated. She said her warnings were ignored." Maya's expression softened slightly. "Bring her in when I call for the first witness." "Yes, ma'am." At 3 o'clock sharp, the inquiry began. The marble atrium had been transformed into a temporary courtroom, its walls lined with cameras and microphones. The seal of the United States judiciary gleamed above the dais. The air was thick with anticipation. Maya took her seat at the center table. "This inquiry," she began, "is not about punishment. It is about exposure. What we hide behind procedure, we will now face in plain sight." Her voice carried through every speaker, every broadcast feed, every living room tuned to the event. "The footage you are about to see," she continued, "is not special. It is ordinary. That is what makes it terrifying." The lights dimmed. Screens lit up with the image of the courthouse steps that morning, the slap, the disbelief, the crowd, the chaos. No commentary, no cuts, just the raw evidence. Every breath, every insult, every moment of silence. When the video ended, the room remained silent. No one dared to move. Maya looked toward the gallery. "I will now call the first witness, Elena Ruiz." The young clerk stood, her knees weak but her resolve steady. She walked to the podium, each step echoing through the room. Her reflection trembled faintly in the polished floor, but her voice, when she spoke, was clear. "My name is Elena Ruiz. I am a junior clerk assigned to courtroom 3. I saw Judge Jefferson's name on the docket early this morning. When I went to inform the officers outside, Officer Miller told me to stay out of it." Maya nodded slowly. "You told them my name was in the system?" "Yes, ma'am. I said I had seen it myself. They ignored me. When I tried again, he told me, 'Do not get involved if you want to keep your job.'" The murmurs started immediately among the press. Maya raised her hand, and the room fell silent again. Did anyone else hear that exchange? Elena looked toward the gallery. Yes. Officer Blake was standing nearby. He looked uncomfortable, but he did not speak. Maya's tone remained calm. "Why did you choose to speak now?" Elena's voice wavered for the first time. "Because I could not sleep. Because I realized silence protects the wrong people. Because I saw how easily the truth can die if no one stands for it." Her words cut through the air like glass. Several reporters lowered their pens, visibly shaken. Maya leaned forward. "Miss Ruiz, your courage today will remind every clerk in this building that conscience outranks protocol. You did the right thing." Elena nodded, tears threatening but never falling. "Thank you, Judge." "How?" From the back of the room, someone began to clap. It started softly, then grew louder, spreading until the entire atrium was filled with applause, not for drama, but for relief. It was the sound of people realizing that integrity still existed inside the machinery of power. Maya waited for the noise to fade before she spoke again. Let this be entered into record. The first witness confirms prior knowledge of the error and attempted to intervene. The system failed her as much as it failed me. Outside, the chant of the crowd resumed, synchronized with the echoes of the applause inside. Justice for all. The sound seeped through the courthouse doors like sunlight. Elena stepped down from the podium, her shoulders trembling, but her face lifted. She had spoken. The silence that had once buried her voice had been broken forever. Maya turned back to the chamber. Truth does not ask permission to speak, she said. It only needs someone to open the door. Endon. She glanced at Captain Heller. Prepare the next witness. Yes, ma'am. Officer Blake is ready. Maya nodded. Then bring him in. And as the doors opened again, letting in the first breeze of evening air, Maya Jefferson understood something deeper. The real trial was no longer about what happened that morning. It was about who would keep standing once the truth had arrived. The witness had awakened, and so had the world watching her. The heavy doors swung open again, and the sound of boots against marble echoed through the inquiry hall. Officer Blake entered first, his posture stiff, his face pale. He had removed his service belt and weapon as protocol required, but the absence of authority on his uniform made him look younger, almost fragile. Behind him walked an investigator from Internal Affairs, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as glass. The crowd outside had quieted to a low, steady murmur. Every few seconds, a chant rose, then faded, replaced by the hum of engines and camera shutters. The world was watching this courtroom, not as an audience, but as a mirror. Maya Jefferson sat upright, her robe gathered neatly, her voice steady as she spoke. Officer Blake, you are aware that this hearing is being recorded and broadcast live to the public? Yes, ma'am, he answered, his voice tight. And you understand that truth under oath is not a performance. It is a promise. Yes, ma'am. She nodded once. Then tell us what you saw on the courthouse steps this morning. Blake inhaled deeply, his hands clasped in front of him. I saw Judge Jefferson approach the courthouse around 8:45 a.m. She was stopped by Officer Miller, who requested identification. She complied. She handed over a federal ID. Was there any reason to question that ID? Blake hesitated. No, ma'am. It looked official. It had a holographic seal. Then why did you not intervene when your superior accused her of falsifying credentials? He looked down. Because he was in charge, and I was not. He said she was resisting verification. Maya leaned forward slightly. Did she resist? Blake's voice cracked. No, ma'am, she just stood there. The room was silent. The microphones picked up every breath. Maya continued. When did you realize something was wrong? When he raised his hand, Blake said, his eyes fixed on the floor. I wanted to stop him, but I froze. It happened fast. And then, his words trailed off. The sound of his breathing filled the microphone. And then, Maya prompted softly. He hit you, Blake said, his throat tightening. And for the first time in my career, I was ashamed of the uniform I was wearing. Gasps rippled through the hall. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. The investigator looked up from his clipboard, watching Blake carefully. Maya's expression did not change. Officer Blake, you chose to speak now, when you could have stayed silent. Why? He swallowed. Because silence is the reason it keeps happening. Because if I do not say it, then it will look like I agreed. And I did not. Maya nodded slowly. You are not excused yet. There is one more thing you must confirm for the record. When Clerk Elena Ruiz approached you earlier that morning, what did she say? Blake looked toward Elena in the gallery. She said your name was in the system, ma'am. She said she had checked it herself. And what did Officer Miller say in response? Blake's face darkened. He told her to go back inside or she would lose her job. The entire room stirred again. Elena bowed her head slightly, eyes closed. Maya's voice was soft but precise. So, 2 people spoke the truth today. One was ignored and one was silenced by fear. She let the statement hang for a moment before turning to the investigator. Please ensure that both testimonies are preserved without redaction. Yes, Judge Jefferson, the investigator said. The tension inside the courtroom was thick enough to taste. Captain Heller stood near the back, arms crossed, his jaw clenched. He knew what came next would tear open the thin fabric of control holding the department together. From outside, through the open upper windows, The distant chant of the crowd filtered in again. Justice has a face. Justice has a name. Maya straightened in her chair. Officer Blake, you may step down. He nodded, his voice breaking. Thank you, Judge. As he turned to leave, a shout erupted from the far corner of the hall. Officer Miller had entered, escorted by 2 internal affairs agents. His face was flushed with anger and disbelief. This is a setup, he barked. You are all turning this into a circus. The agents tried to calm him, but he jerked his arm free. I did my job. She refused orders. Maya rose slowly from her seat. Officer Miller, you are out of order. You tricked us, he shouted, pointing at her. You came here dressed like some protester just to make us look bad. Maya's voice was low, calm, and cutting. You did that yourself. The camera zoomed in. Every word was being broadcast across the nation. Miller's rage faltered as her composure hit him like a wall. He took a shaky breath. You think that robe makes you untouchable? No, she said simply. It makes me accountable. The difference is that I welcome it. For a moment, he had no response. The marble room swallowed his silence whole. From the gallery, a man stood up and spoke clearly. She is right. We saw it happen. You cannot shout down the truth. Ugh. The crowd inside began to murmur again, voices blending, opinions clashing, the sound of a nation divided playing out inside one building. Maya raised her hand for quiet. Let this be recorded, she said. Division is not the enemy. Denial is. We will not heal by pretending that this was an isolated event. We will heal by admitting that it was expected. The investigator turned off his microphone and looked up. Judge Jefferson, do you wish to proceed to cross-examination? Yes, she said, but not of the officers, of the culture that trained them. The line drew a collective breath from everyone in the room. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Outside, the setting sun cut through the glass ceiling, washing the chamber in gold. The light fell across Maya's robe, across the trembling faces of the officers, and across the rows of silent onlookers who finally understood that this was no longer about one slap, one morning, or one courthouse. This was the moment justice stopped whispering and began to demand an answer. The inquiry hall felt like it was breathing, each inhale from the crowd matched by an exhale of tension. The golden light from the setting sun stretched long across the marble floor, painting everything in the color of revelation. The court was no longer a room. It had become a living organism, witness, judge, jury, and conscience all at once. Officer Miller stood in the center, his face pale beneath the overhead lights. The arrogance that had once carried him through the morning had drained away, leaving only defiance and confusion. His badge, removed for the inquiry, sat on the table beside him, catching flashes of the camera lights like a relic from a past already dying. Judge Maya Jefferson watched him closely, her gaze steady and unblinking. Officer Miller, she began, you are here because you struck a federal judge in public view. That is not in dispute. The question before this inquiry is not what you did, but why you believed you could do it. He swallowed hard, his voice rough. I was following procedure. She refused to identify herself properly. Properly, Maya repeated, her tone edged with quiet disbelief. Tell me, officer, what would have made it proper in your eyes? He hesitated. I expected a badge or someone who looked like they belonged. Someone who looked like they belonged, Maya echoed, her voice lowering until the entire room leaned closer to hear. Describe that for me. What does belonging look like to you? Miller's mouth opened, then closed. He searched for words that would not betray him, but there were none. The silence that followed stretched long enough to feel like confession. You cannot describe it, Maya said softly, because you did not see a person. You saw a category. You saw what generations of bias told you to see, and when the truth did not fit your expectation, you struck it. A murmur rolled through the hall, low and steady. Reporters exchanged glances. The internal affairs investigator stopped writing and simply listened. Miller's voice cracked under the weight of her calm. It was a mistake. I panicked. Everyone was watching. I had to show control. Control? She repeated. You call it control when you put your hand on someone's face? You call it control when you use your fear as justification for violence? He looked down. I am not a bad man, Judge. I made a bad call. Maya nodded slowly. That may be true, but a bad call from someone with power is not just a mistake. It is a message. She leaned forward, her tone deliberate. Do you know what message you sent this morning? He shook his head weakly. You told every black child watching that even their silence is seen as defiance. You told every honest officer that justice bends when comfort demands it. And you told this nation that its laws still have blind spots where faces like mine disappear. The hall fell completely silent. The air itself seemed to freeze. For the first time, Officer Miller's eyes filled with something other than anger, shame. His voice trembled. "I do not know how to fix that." "You do not," she said simply. "You listen to those who will." Her words landed like verdicts, measured, irreversible. Captain Heller stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the table. "Judge Jefferson," he said carefully, "Internal Affairs recommends suspension pending review." Maya's eyes never left Miller. "Not suspension," she said. "Education. I want him assigned to work under community oversight, unarmed, unshielded. I want him to see what justice looks like when it is not wrapped in authority." The captain blinked. "That is unconventional." "So was today," she replied. A rustle of surprise moved through the audience. Some reporters nodded in approval. Others whispered about precedent and protocol. But Maya did not flinch. She had no interest in precedent. Precedent was what had built the walls she was dismantling. From the back of the room, Elena Ruiz rose to her feet, her voice carried with quiet conviction. "That is fair, Judge. Change will not come from punishment alone. It will come from understanding." Maya looked at her and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The crowd was no longer divided. Where anger had lived, something else was taking root: recognition. But outside, the city was still pulsing with unrest. Protesters and supporters filled the plaza, the air thick with emotion. Chants collided with camera shutters. Every second, millions of people were watching the live broadcast, waiting to see how this day would end. Inside, the inquiry was winding toward its climax. Maya turned to the camera that streamed live across the country. Her voice was low but resonant, shaped by clarity rather than volume. "This moment will not be remembered for the violence that began it," she said. "It will be remembered for how we answered it. Justice is not about victory. It is about vision. What you see determines what you protect." She looked back at Miller one last time. "You failed to see, officer. That is your crime. Do better, or step aside for those who will." He bowed his head, tears threatening but held back. "Yes, Judge." The investigator marked the final note on his clipboard. Hearing adjourned for the day. Maya stood. The entire hall rose with her, instinctively, almost reverently. As she turned toward the marble doors, the last light of day spilled through the windows, stretching long shadows across the room. The weight of centuries seemed to lift slightly from the air. Outside, the crowd roared not in chaos, but in unity. Maya paused at the threshold, her silhouette framed by gold light. She spoke quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Every system breaks before it rebuilds. Let this be the break that finally means something." Then she stepped forward into the noise, into the night, into the eyes of a nation that was finally learning to see. Night settled over Washington, but the courthouse did not sleep. The crowd outside had thinned only slightly. Clusters of people still lingered on the marble steps, their faces lit by the glow of phone screens replaying the footage of the day. Reporters stood before cameras delivering their closing segments, their voices hushed, reverent. For once, the city's noise had given way to something deeper: anticipation wrapped in silence. Inside, the inquiry chamber was empty now except for Judge Maya Jefferson. She sat alone at the center table, the same place she had presided hours earlier. The microphones had been turned off, the cameras powered down, but the memory of what had been said still hung heavy in the air. The marble seemed to remember every word. Her robe rested over the back of her chair. The black fabric looked almost alive under the faint overhead light, like a shadow that refused to leave. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, and let her eyes close for the first time since dawn. Her body was still, but her mind would not stop moving. Every sound from the corridor, the hum of ventilation, the muffled click of distant heels felt amplified. She could hear the faint rustle of flags above the dais. The stillness pressed down on her until it became a physical weight, but she did not resist it. She welcomed it. Silence had always been her language of strength. The world mistook it for submission, but Maya had long learned that silence is where justice sharpens its edge. Her thoughts drifted not to the slap, not to the crowd, but to her mother. She could still see her as clearly as if she were sitting across the table. The memory was from decades ago, A one-bedroom apartment in North Carolina, the soft hum of a box fan, the smell of fried cornbread in the air. Her mother, Rosa Jefferson, had been ironing her uniform for the night shift at the hospital when Maya, then 8 years old, asked, "Mama, why do they talk down to you when you help them?" Rosa had smiled sadly. "Because they think help should look like them, baby. But that is all right. The day they stop underestimating us is the day they stop teaching us how to win." Those words had lived inside Maya like a seed that grew quietly in the dark. And now, in this hall of marble and power, that seed had finally broken through the stone. She opened her eyes. The silence deepened. The world outside was waiting for her next move. But inside this space, she allowed herself to simply exist without performance, without defense. The door creaked open softly. Alana Briggs stepped in, holding a stack of reports against her chest. Her voice was cautious. "Judge Jefferson?" Maya looked up. "You are still here, Alana?" "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to finish the documentation before morning." She hesitated. "The media is calling this the Day of Reckoning. They are saying you changed the face of the justice system in a single afternoon." Maya exhaled slowly. "They said the same thing about every woman who forced the system to see her." Then they moved on to the next headline. Alana took a seat across from her, eyes filled with both admiration and exhaustion. "Do you ever get used to it, the weight of it all?" "No," Maya said simply. "You just stop waiting for permission to carry it." They sat in shared silence for several moments. The air between them was heavy but not oppressive. It was sacred, like the pause between heartbeats. Alana broke it softly. "The crowd outside is still here. They are chanting your name." "I know," Maya said. "But it is not my name they are calling. It is what it stands for." Alana nodded, understanding. "What happens next?" Maya's eyes drifted toward the tall window overlooking the city. Beyond the glass, the Washington Monument stood against the night sky, bright and unmoving. "Next," she said quietly, "we listen. Before every revolution, there is silence. That is how truth gathers its breath." She stood, slow and deliberate, and began to walk across the room. Her footsteps echoed, one after another, steady as a metronome. She stopped at the far end of the hall where the words "equal justice under law" were engraved into the stone. Her hand brushed against the cold surface. "How many times have we said these words?" she murmured. "And how many times have we meant them?" Alana watched her carefully. "You did today." Maya smiled faintly, not out of pride but acceptance. "Today was only the beginning. Tomorrow, we face the cost of truth." Oh, the clock on the wall ticked once. Then again, each sound like a heartbeat in the quiet. Alana stood, gathering her papers. "Should I call for transport, Judge?" Maya shook her head. "No, I will walk. But the press, they will wait. Let them learn that silence can be stronger than spectacle." She reached for her robe, draping it over her arm, and began the long walk toward the main doors. Every step felt like a closing argument written in motion. When she reached the entrance, she paused. The glass reflected her image back at her tired eyes, unbroken spirit, the faint bruise on her cheek, now darkened but not hidden. Outside, the chant continued, steady as a drumbeat. "Justice for all. Justice for all." Maya closed her eyes and listened. The rhythm matched her own pulse, and for one perfect moment, she let the silence answer for her. The door opened. The night air rushed in. She stepped outside, not as the woman who had been struck, nor even as the judge who had won. She stepped into the darkness as the embodiment of what silence could do when it was finally allowed to speak. Every camera turned toward her again, but this time, she did not speak a single word. She simply looked into the lens, steady, grounded, eternal, and the world, for once, understood everything without her having to say anything at all. Dawn broke slow and reluctant over Washington. The air outside the courthouse still carried the residue of chants and camera lights from the night before. The marble steps were littered with coffee cups, protest signs, and the faint traces of candle wax evidence of a vigil that had lasted until sunrise. But inside, behind the tall glass doors, everything was unnervingly still. Judge Maya Jefferson was awake before the city. She sat in her chambers, the blinds half open, letting in the pale gray light of morning. Her robe hung neatly on the back of her chair, and in front of her was a small cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold. On her desk, a single file folder lay open. Across the top was the heading, Internal Affairs, Preliminary Report, Officer Misconduct, Case 2000, 476. Her fingers hovered over the edge of the paper but did not turn the page. The truth was already written there, and she did not need to read it again. She had lived it. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the fatigue that had been chasing her since yesterday. Her cheek was still tender from the slap, though the swelling had gone down. She touched the faint bruise with the tip of her fingers, not out of pain, but as a reminder, proof that dignity sometimes bleeds. The quiet was broken by a soft chime from her smartwatch. The screen flashed once. Alana Briggs, Priority Channel. Maya pressed the receiver. "Go ahead, Alana." Good morning, Judge," came the assistant's voice, brisk but careful. "I have updates from the Chief Justice's office. They are requesting a private conference with you before the full judiciary meeting at 9 o'clock. Maya leaned back slightly, her eyes still on the file. "Requesting or demanding?" Alana hesitated. They said strongly advised. Maya allowed herself a faint smile. "Then we will attend on our terms. Schedule it for 8:30. "Yes, Judge." She was about to end the call when Alana's tone changed. "There is something else." A message came through the encrypted line around 4:30 this morning. It was marked Protocol 6. The words hung heavy in the air. Maya sat upright, fully alert. "Protocol 6, she repeated quietly. "Who activated it?" "Unknown, ma'am. The system logged it as an internal request from your judicial ID. Maya frowned. "That is impossible. I did not authorize any override." "I know," Alana said. "But the system confirmed your biometric code. The request was routed through the federal security network. It triggered an automatic review of all courthouse surveillance for the last 72 hours. Maya stood, walking toward the window. The city below was just waking, its streets still washed in early light. "So someone is using my authority to investigate this building," she said slowly. "Good. Let them find what they are looking for." Alana hesitated on the other end. "You do not sound surprised." "I am not," Maya said. "Truth does not travel in one direction. Once it starts moving, it finds its way into every locked room." There was a pause, then Alana's voice softened. "Do you want me to trace it?" "No," Maya answered. "Let it run. I want to see where it leads." She ended the call and stood for a long time in front of the window. The courthouse reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, superimposed over the city skyline. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar, an undercurrent of vulnerability that was not weakness but awareness. The knock on the door was soft but steady. "Come in," she said. Captain Ross Heller entered, his uniform crisp, his expression carefully neutral. He carried a thin digital tablet in one hand. "Judge Jefferson, the department has completed its overnight review. Officer Miller is in custody, under protective watch. Officer Blake and Officer Daniels have both submitted voluntary statements confirming your account." "Good," Maya said. "And the footage?" He hesitated. "That is the problem, ma'am. There is a missing file. One of the surveillance cameras at the north entrance stopped recording 15 minutes before the incident. The log shows a manual override." "Deleted?" "No, Judge," he said. "Redirected. Someone rerouted the feed to an external server. We are trying to trace it now." Maya studied his face carefully. "And you think that has something to do with Protocol 6? "It lines up with the same timestamp," he confirmed. She nodded once. "Then whoever triggered it wants us to see something or to hide it." Captain Heller's jaw tightened. "Do you want us to shut down external access?" "No," Maya said firmly. "That would make us look like we have something to fear. Keep every line open. Let transparency be our armor." "Who?" Heller hesitated before adding, "You realize, Judge, that what you are doing is dangerous. You are making enemies on both sides." Maya looked out the window again, the sunlight now touching the edge of the courthouse facade. "Justice does not survive by being liked, Captain. It survives by being undeniable." He gave a small nod of respect. "Understood." When he left, the silence returned, but it was no longer the same silence as before. This one hummed, alive, charged with purpose. Maya reached for her phone and dialed a direct number, one she had not used in years. It rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "Dr. Jefferson, it has been a long time." "Too long," she said. "You once told me to call if the system ever turned inward on itself." The man on the line chuckled softly. "So it finally happened." "It was inevitable," she replied. "I need access to the Federal Oversight Archives." Quietly, I want every communication between the Department of Justice and the Metropolitan Police Division for the last 48 hours. There was a pause. You realize you are asking for classified data. I am asking for evidence, she said. And you owe me a favor. He sighed. You will have it within the hour. Thank you, she said. When she ended the call, she stood still, letting the gravity of what she had just set in motion settle in her chest. The silence in the room seemed to bend around her, like a bowstring pulled tight. Then, quietly, she spoke to herself. Activate Protocol 6. Her smartwatch blinked once. The screen lit up with a single phrase, Judicial Override, confirmed. Somewhere deep in the courthouse, servers hummed to life. Files began to decrypt, and the first call that morning became more than an investigation. It became the opening act of justice striking back. By 8:30 a.m., the courthouse had transformed once again. Reporters filled the plaza, their cameras aimed like spotlights, waiting for the next headline to fall from the marble steps. What they did not know was that the real story was already unfolding inside, deep in the digital veins of the building. Judge Maya Jefferson sat in the central command room, a space usually reserved for cybersecurity audits and emergency briefings. The air hummed with quiet intensity. A wall of screens surrounded her, each displaying fragments of surveillance footage, data logs, and encrypted communications flowing through the federal network. The glow from the monitors reflected in her eyes, calm but alert, calculating every pixel of truth. Alana Briggs stood beside her, headset on, coordinating a small team of analysts. Judge, the system is still decrypting the external feed that was rerouted yesterday. We have traced the origin to a server registered under the name Aegis 5. Maya raised an eyebrow. Aegis 5 belongs to the Federal Oversight Division, does it not? Yes, ma'am. It is supposed to handle cross-departmental transparency audits. But this feed, it is not part of any official channel. Maya's gaze sharpened. So someone inside the Oversight Division has been watching the courthouse off the record. Exactly. She leaned forward, project the recovered data on the main screen. The image flickered to life. A grainy feed from the courthouse security camera dated 20 minutes before the confrontation. The footage showed Officer Miller and two other men in plain clothes speaking near the north entrance. One of the plainclothes men handed Miller a folded paper. The audio was muted, but the body language was unmistakable, orders being given, not discussed. Alana's eyes widened. That is not standard procedure. No, Maya said quietly. It is orchestration. She watched as the plainclothes men disappeared into a black sedan parked just out of frame. The timestamp blinked red. Freeze that frame, she ordered. Enhance the license plate. The analysts worked in silence, typing rapidly. The blurred numbers sharpened slowly into clarity. Alana read them aloud. District vehicle, registered to the Department of Public Order. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling through her nose. That department falls under the direct supervision of the Federal Oversight Division, the same office currently auditing me. Alana turned toward her, concern flickering across her face. Judge, that means this might not have been a random incident. It was never random, Maya said. Prejudice rarely is. It is organized chaos wearing the mask of coincidence. She stood, the light from the screens framing her silhouette. Send that image to the Internal Affairs investigators. Quietly. Do not let the press see it yet. Yes, Judge. As Alana worked, Maya turned toward the window. Below, the city was fully awake now. The courthouse steps gleamed white in the morning light. Protesters and supporters stood side by side, signs raised high. Some bore her name. Others simply read, Truth lives here. For a moment, she felt the contradiction of it all, the weight of being both a symbol and a human being. She had not sought fame, only clarity. Yet clarity, once revealed, always burned through illusion faster than people were ready to accept. Captain Ross Heller entered the room, his expression grim. Judge Jefferson, the Chief Justice is calling for an emergency meeting. He says the Department of Justice is requesting all evidence related to the courthouse incident. Let them request, she said without turning. But not before we finish what we started. He hesitated. You realize this could escalate into a federal confrontation. Oh. It already has, she replied. The only difference is who controls the narrative. Alana looked up from her tablet. Judge, the decrypted audio file just came through. Play it, Maya said. Static filled the room for a second, Then voices muffled but clear enough to recognize. It was Officer Miller's voice, recorded before the altercation. She is on the list. If she shows up, make sure it does not go smoothly. We need an example for the Oversight Committee. Maya's stomach tightened. The second voice, male, older, responded, "You do your job, and we will handle the rest." The audio cut out. Silence filled the command room. Alana's voice was barely a whisper. "They targeted you, Judge." Maya's expression hardened. "No, Alana. They targeted justice. I am only the name they used to disguise it." Captain Heller took a step forward. "We can use this recording to issue immediate warrants." Maya shook her head. "Not yet. If we move too early, they will bury the rest. Let them believe they are still hidden. Let them talk. The walls are listening now." The captain nodded reluctantly. "Understood." Maya turned back to the screens, the reflection of the data streaming across her face. "Do you see it, Alana?" she asked softly. "See what, Judge?" "The pattern. It is not about one courthouse or one slap. It is about a culture that trains people to see power as protection instead of responsibility." She pointed to the scrolling lines of data. Every encrypted message, every file erased, every silence enforced, it all tells the same story. They built a system that fears exposure more than injustice. Alana watched her, realizing what was unfolding was bigger than any single inquiry. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. Maya's voice was steady. "I will do what the law was meant to do before it learned how to hide. We will unseal every file, every hidden report, every name behind this, and we will do it publicly." Alana hesitated. "That will cause a national scandal." Maya looked back at her with eyes that burned calm and bright. "Then let the scandal be truth. The country has survived lies for too long." Outside, the first sirens began to echo faintly down the avenue, the sound of the city stirring in response to something it could not yet name. Inside, the realization had already spread through circuits, screens, and souls alike. The truth was no longer a secret. It was a signal, and it had begun to move. By 10 o'clock, the courthouse was no longer just a courthouse. It had become the eye of a storm, part tribunal, part broadcast studio, and part moral battlefield. The entire nation was tuned in. Screens glowed in cafes, classrooms, and offices across America. Every feed carried the same live headline: "Federal Judge Exposes Systemic Abuse. Oversight Division Under Fire." Inside, the atmosphere trembled with the tension of too much truth. The central chamber where Maya Jefferson had held the inquiry the day before was once again full. Reporters lined the walls, notebooks ready. Internal affairs agents whispered among themselves, unsure whether to treat this as a legal proceeding or an act of revolution. Maya stood at the center, the black robe draped over her shoulders again. Her expression was unreadable, her voice even. "Bring in the witness," she said. The double doors opened, and Captain Ross Heller entered with Officer Blake following close behind. Behind them came Elena Ruiz, clutching a folder so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Maya gestured toward the podium. "Miss Ruiz, you may proceed." Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she began. "Judge Jefferson, members of the committee, and the people watching, I have submitted a copy of the encrypted transcript we recovered from the courthouse security system this morning." Maya nodded. "Please read the relevant portion aloud." Elena unfolded a single page and began to read. At 8:27 a.m. on the morning of the incident, Officer Miller received a radio transmission marked Directive Aegis. The message stated, "Target arriving. Maintain control of scene. Ensure compliance demonstration for the committee." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Officers exchanged alarmed looks. Maya lifted her hand, and silence returned like obedience to gravity. "That phrase," she said clearly, "compliance demonstration. What do you believe it means, Miss Ruiz?" Elena hesitated. "It means the incident was planned. They wanted a public confrontation, something that would justify the expansion of authority under the new oversight policy." A low murmur rippled through the chamber. One of the senior investigators whispered to another, "They were staging fear to sell control." Maya's expression did not change, but her eyes hardened. "Enter that phrase into record," she said. "The nation deserves to know the price of its obedience." Captain Heller stepped forward. "Judge Jefferson, we have corroborated the source of the message. The authorization code used in that directive matches the signature of Deputy Director Malcolm Price of the Federal Oversight Division." The air left the room in a collective gasp. The name was known to everyone. present a man considered untouchable, the architect of several national security policies. Maya's tone remained calm, but her words carried an iron edge. Issue a summons to Deputy Director Price, effective immediately. An officer near the back hesitated. Judge, he is not subject to your jurisdiction. Maya turned toward him slowly. He is subject to the law, and I am the law in this jurisdiction. The authority in her voice silenced the protest before it could form. Across the city, news anchors interrupted their broadcasts to report the new development. A federal judge has issued a direct summons to a senior official within the Oversight Division. Sources say the order bypassed traditional protocol, invoking emergency judicial authority. Inside the chamber, the tension grew heavier by the minute. Reporters whispered into microphones. A few security officers shifted uneasily, unsure whether they were still enforcing order or witnessing history. Elena closed her folder, her voice shaking slightly. Judge Jefferson, there is something else. The message logs show that the deleted video feed from the north entrance was accessed remotely by the same office. They knew about the slap before it happened. End. Maya let out a long, controlled breath. So the humiliation was not spontaneous, it was scripted. Captain Heller's voice was low. Yes, ma'am. And now that script has been exposed. Maya stepped down from the dais, walking to the center of the room. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. When she spoke, her voice was softer, but it filled every corner of the space. I have spent my life inside the system, believing that it could be corrected from within. But yesterday, I learned that the system does not fear corruption, it depends on it. Her gaze swept across the crowd. If power can humiliate justice in public view, then no citizen is safe in private. The reporters stood, capturing every word, every breath. The feed streamed live to millions of viewers. Elena spoke again, unable to contain herself. Judge, what happens now? Maya turned toward her, her expression both fierce and compassionate. Now the system must see itself. We will hold a public tribunal, under oath, with every member of the Oversight Division. Every order, every directive, every lie. A ripple of shock moved through the room. One reporter whispered, "She is putting the government on trial." Maya heard it and answered without hesitation. Not the government, the conscience behind it. Captain Heller received a message on his tablet and stepped closer. Judge, we just received confirmation Deputy Director Price is en route. He is bringing legal counsel and federal marshals. Maya gave a slow nod. Then let him bring his army. Truth does not flinch. Outside, the roar of the crowd began to rise again as news of the summons spread. Protesters waved signs. Others fell to their knees in prayer. The entire city pulsed with one shared thought. Something irreversible was about to happen. Inside, Maya turned to Alana Briggs, who had just entered the chamber with a fresh report. Alana, ensure the live feed remains uninterrupted. No delays, no filters, no commentary. The people will see everything. Yes, Judge. Maya looked back toward the doorway, where the faint echo of approaching footsteps could already be heard. The sound grew louder, measured, deliberate, official. She took a slow breath. The moment truth walks into the room, she murmured, power always follows behind, pretending to explain itself. Hem. And as the doors began to open, letting in the blinding flash of camera lights, Maya Jefferson stood her ground, ready to face the man who had ordered her humiliation, ready to dismantle the illusion that authority and justice were ever the same thing. The tipping point had arrived, and the fall would not be quiet. The doors swung open, and the air itself seemed to change temperature. The cameras that lined the back wall shifted their focus, lenses whirring as one of the most powerful men in Washington walked into the chamber. Deputy Director Malcolm Price was the embodiment of controlled arrogance, immaculate gray suit, silver tie, posture straight as a blade. His calm was a performance perfected over decades of power. Two federal marshals flanked him, not as guards but as escorts of decorum. Behind him came his counsel, a tall woman with an expression carved from stone. They stopped at the edge of the inquiry floor, where Maya Jefferson stood waiting. Price smiled faintly, the kind of smile that belonged to men who never lost in public. Judge Jefferson, he said smoothly, this is an unusual setting for a conversation between branches. Maya's tone was polite but sharp. It is not a conversation, Deputy Director. It is a record. He chuckled quietly. Then by all means, let us make it official. The microphones blinked to life. Every camera in the room turned toward him. He adjusted his cufflinks before taking his seat. His counsel sat beside him, placing a tablet on the table. Maya opened the session. This inquiry is now in continuation. Present is Deputy Director Malcolm Price of the Federal Oversight Division. The record will show that this summons was issued under emergency judicial authority following verified evidence of interference in an ongoing case. Price leaned forward slightly. With respect, Judge Jefferson, you are overstepping your jurisdiction. The Federal Oversight Division answers only to the Department of Justice. Maya met his gaze. And justice answers to the truth, which means today you answer to me. The room erupted in whispers. Reporters froze mid-sentence. The audio from every microphone captured her words in crisp, perfect clarity. Price tilted his head, studying her. You are making this personal. No, she said, her voice calm but carrying iron. You made it personal the moment you turned my face into your lesson. He blinked, momentarily caught off guard. She continued. The order labeled Directive Aegis was authorized by your office. That order led to a public assault on a federal judge. Explain why your name is on that authorization. Price exhaled slowly. Judge, you must understand, Aegis is an internal compliance program designed to monitor potential breaches in procedural conduct. If your presence caused a security alarm, it was an unfortunate coincidence. Maya's expression did not change. Coincidence does not sign paperwork, Mr. Price. The counsel beside him interjected. Objection. The question implies intent without established causality. Maya turned to her. Objection noted. Overruled. The intent is the inquiry itself. The woman's lips tightened, but she said nothing further. Maya gestured to Captain Heller, who handed her a digital tablet. Mr. Price, this is an audio file recovered from your department's server at approximately 8:26 a.m. yesterday morning. It records your direct subordinate giving operational instructions to Officer Miller. Would you like to hear your department's definition of coincidence? Before he could respond, she pressed play. The room filled with the grainy but unmistakable sound of his own voice, steady, bureaucratic, lethal. Ensure compliance on the courthouse steps. No disruptions inside the chamber. The optics must reinforce control. The playback ended. The silence that followed was so absolute it bordered on physical. Price's mask cracked for the first time. His counsel whispered something urgent in his ear, but he raised a hand to silence her. That recording, he said slowly, has been manipulated. Maya leaned forward. Our forensics team authenticated it. The metadata contains your personal voice signature and your department's encryption timestamp. That is not manipulation. That is accountability. Price's jaw tightened. You are misinterpreting a protocol meant for public order. No, she said, voice low but resolute. I am reading the manual that you wrote, and it says nothing about assaulting citizens for optics. The truth, Mr. Price, is that you built a system to control the perception of justice while eroding its reality. He looked at her then, not as a rival, but as someone who had just stepped beyond his understanding of power. You think you are fighting corruption, Judge Jefferson. You are fighting architecture. I know, she said. That is why it matters. The crowd inside the chamber stirred again. Every word they exchanged rippled outward through the live broadcast, carried to living rooms, classrooms, and courthouse lobbies across the nation. Price tried a different tactic. Do you realize what chaos your actions will cause? You are tearing down trust in every institution that holds this country together. Maya's eyes softened, but her tone remained cutting. If trust depends on silence, it was never real. For the first time, he had no reply. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned toward the gallery. This nation has been told for generations that order must come before truth. But order without truth is not peace, it is obedience. Applause erupted, spontaneous and uncontrollable. The marshals moved instinctively, trying to quiet the crowd, but Maya lifted her hand. Let them speak. For once, let the people's noise be louder than the system's excuses. Price stood slowly, his voice controlled but trembling beneath the surface. This inquiry is a farce. You are making a mockery of the law. Maya met his gaze, unflinching. The law was mocked the moment you turned justice into theater. Today, the curtain falls. The cameras caught everything, the defiance in her eyes, the crack in his composure, the visible shift in the room when power met principle and began to fracture. Price leaned forward one last time, his voice low and venomous. You will regret this, Judge Jefferson. The system protects its architects. She smiled faintly. the kind of smile that belonged not to victory but to conviction. Then it is time we built a new one. The flash of cameras ignited again, bright as lightning. Reporters surged to their feet, the sound of their voices rising like a storm. Outside, the crowd's roar grew until it seemed to shake the marble foundation of the courthouse. The people were no longer waiting for permission, they were answering her call. And in that moment, under the blaze of lights and history, Maya Jefferson understood something profound. The man behind the curtain had finally been seen, and once seen, he could never again make the world believe in his illusion. The sound in the chamber had changed. It was not applause anymore, it was something deeper, like the first rumble before a storm breaks open. Reporters were standing, phones and microphones pointed forward, as if the air itself were charged. Deputy Director Malcolm Price's words, his threats, his arrogance hung in the space between past and consequence. Judge Maya Jefferson stood unmoving at the center, her robe catching the light of hundreds of camera flashes. The chaos around her only made her stillness more powerful. It was not the silence of fear, it was the silence of a storm gathering its focus. Captain Ross Heller approached her cautiously. "Judge, we should clear the chamber. The crowd outside is swelling again. The federal marshals are requesting reinforcement." Maya turned to him slowly. "No, let them stay. The people have been outside the walls of power for too long. Today, the walls are open." He hesitated, torn between duty and awe. "Yes, ma'am." Price's counsel stood, voice sharp. "This proceeding is illegal. You have no jurisdiction to hold a federal official in this capacity." Maya's voice came steady and deliberate. "When justice is violated under color of authority, jurisdiction belongs to the truth." Every microphone caught it. The sentence echoed through live broadcasts and was instantly quoted across every screen in the country. Price smirked, though his confidence was cracking. "You are making this emotional, Judge. The system cannot run on sentiment." "Neither can it run on cruelty," she replied. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You think these cameras make you powerful? They make you vulnerable. The people watching will move on to the next outrage before sunrise." Maya looked him dead in the eye. "Then we will light a fire that does not go out." She turned away from him, addressing the gallery and the cameras. "Every document, every directive, every recording gathered during this inquiry will be made public today. No redactions, no edits, no negotiations. If the system fears the light, then it was built in darkness." The room erupted again, reporters speaking over one another, camera lights flashing brighter. Somewhere outside, the chant of the crowd grew louder, surging toward the building like a wave. "Justice belongs to the people. Justice belongs to the people." Captain Heller received a transmission in his earpiece and looked to Maya. "Judge, the Oversight Division is issuing an emergency order to shut down the broadcast feed." Maya's jaw tightened. "Can they? They control the federal network. Then give the people the truth before they can take it." Alana Briggs, standing near the back, immediately typed into her tablet. "I am rerouting the feed through open-source channels now. It will take a few seconds." Price turned sharply. "That is a federal crime." Maya faced him. "So is weaponizing obedience." The monitors flickered. Then the courtroom feed reappeared not through the government channel, but through thousands of independent live streams shared by viewers across the country. For the first time in years, the public controlled the narrative. Maya took a breath, steady and full. "You built systems that listen to every citizen," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "Today, the citizens are listening back." And Price's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what you are starting." She stepped closer, her tone quiet but cutting. "Oh, I do. You built an empire on silence. I am simply returning the sound." He sat down slowly, his confidence dissolving in the roar of the crowd that could now be heard even through the thick courthouse walls. Maya turned back to the camera. "To every person watching, justice is not a monument, it is a motion. It moves when we move, it breathes when we speak, and it fails when we stop demanding it. The law does not belong to those who write it, it belongs to those who live under it." Her words flowed like verdicts written in the air itself. Captain Heller glanced toward the windows. "Judge, they are cheering outside. The crowd has grown past the plaza. It is spreading down Constitution Avenue." Maya allowed herself one small smile. "Then the people have taken the floor." The live feed captured her as she closed the inquiry, her final words calm, unbroken, immortal. This record will remain open until every shadow is named. The fire of truth has started. Let no one dare to put it out. As she struck the gavel once, the sound echoed like thunder rolling through marble and history. Outside, the crowd roared not in anger, but in awakening, and somewhere deep within the network, the files she had ordered released began to appear on screens across the nation. Names, orders, signatures, the architecture of control laid bare for everyone to see. The system had tried to contain her. Now it was burning from the inside out. By nightfall, the city pulsed like a living heartbeat. The courthouse that once represented quiet hierarchy now glowed in the dark like a beacon and a wound at the same time. Screens across the country flickered with the same broadcast documents, orders, and recordings that Judge Maya Jefferson had unleashed hours earlier. The evidence spread faster than any headline, carried not by reporters but by people themselves. In homes, on sidewalks, in crowded subway cars, citizens watched the truth unfold in real time. Names of officials appeared like ghosts resurrected from secrecy. Internal memos revealed directives disguised as policies. One recording captured a senior officer saying, "The law is perception, not principle." It looped endlessly across social media, igniting a firestorm of outrage, but with the fire came fear. Maya sat in her chambers, the blinds drawn, her robe folded neatly on the table beside her. The faint hum of the courthouse generators filled the silence. She could feel the energy outside the protests, the chanting, the traffic frozen by waves of people, but inside the walls, there was only exhaustion. Captain Ross Heller entered quietly. His uniform was loosened, his eyes shadowed by fatigue. "Judge," he said softly, "I think you should see this." He placed a tablet on her desk. The screen displayed a security feed from the courthouse perimeter. Dozens of unmarked vehicles surrounded the block. Armed agents moved methodically, coordinating through encrypted channels. Maya watched for several seconds, calm but alert. "Who authorized this?" "The Department of Justice," Heller replied. "They claim it is for your protection." "Protection from what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Heller hesitated. "From escalation. They believe the exposure of those files constitutes a national security breach." Maya leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "Truth has always been the most dangerous weapon in this country." He looked at her, torn between duty and conscience. "They are setting up for a containment order. If they declare martial control of this district, your authority will be suspended." Maya's gaze met his. "Then I will speak before they silence me." Judge, that might be exactly what they want to provoke you into defiance." She stood, her movements precise and deliberate. "Defiance is not the crime, Captain. Obedience without question is." He said nothing. She picked up her robe and draped it over her shoulders again. It felt heavier now, not because of fabric, but because of the truth it carried. "Patch me through to the network," she said. "I want the broadcast live again." Heller's voice was low. "If they cut the feed, it could disappear forever." "Then we will speak to whoever can still hear us," she said. Moments later, the courtroom lights flickered back to life. The same cameras that had captured the inquiry now blinked awake once more. Maya stood alone before them, the faint noise of protest rising through the marble floor beneath her feet. "This morning," she began, her voice steady, "I released the truth because silence had become complicity. Some call it chaos. I call it clarity. A nation that hides its wounds will never heal." She paused, letting her words settle into the air. "I have been told that my authority may be revoked. That is acceptable. Power is not my legacy, integrity is." Outside, thunder rolled not from the sky, but from the crowd. People were chanting her name now, their voices echoing through the city streets. Maya continued, "If the cost of light is stability, then let the night tremble. If the price of honesty is my title, then I surrender it freely. But I will not surrender the truth." Captain Heller watched from the doorway, his throat tight. "Judge," he whispered, "they are cutting the power grid." Maya turned her head slightly toward him. "Then remember this moment when the lights go out. Truth does not die in darkness, it learns how to see in it." As if on cue, the room plunged into shadow. The broadcast cameras lost their signal, but the audio powered by emergency backup continued to transmit. Her voice, disembodied but resolute, echoed across millions of speakers. "Justice is not a flame that needs permission to burn. It only needs oxygen, and you, the people, are that oxygen." Then the feed went silent. Outside, however, the crowd erupted not in panic, but in unity. Cell phone lights rose one by one, spreading across the plaza like stars reclaiming the night. And in that glowing sea of defiance, the message was clear. The fire she had started was no longer hers to control. It belonged to everyone. The city fell into darkness like a curtain being drawn over a stage. Streetlights flickered once, then went out entirely. Screens that had been streaming the broadcast only seconds earlier went black. Power grids failed one after another, plunging entire blocks of Washington into an unnatural silence. But silence was never empty. It was full of breath, of heartbeats, of fear. Outside the courthouse, the crowd stood motionless for a heartbeat before the first light appeared. A single phone flashlight, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. In moments, the plaza glowed with the soft, white shimmer of ordinary people refusing to disappear. They had no leader now, only conviction. Inside, Judge Maya Jefferson remained standing in the darkness of the chamber. The emergency backup generator had failed faster than expected. The air smelled faintly of dust and ozone. Captain Ross Heller's voice broke the silence. "Judge, we have lost all communications. The entire district is down." Maya's voice was calm but resolute. "Then we return to the oldest form of power presence." He frowned. "Presence, ma'am?" "Yes," she said. "The kind they cannot switch off." He turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the glow from the thousands of phone lights shimmered like stars reflecting off water. The sound of the crowd rose soft at first, then building into a rhythmic chant that rolled through the air like thunder. "We see you, we see you, we see you." Maya stepped closer to the glass, her silhouette framed by the faint glow outside. For the first time since the ordeal began, she let her hand rest against the cold pane. The vibration of the voices below trembled through the glass into her palm. "They are not afraid anymore," she whispered. Heller looked at her. "And neither are you." "I have been afraid every day," she said quietly. "Afraid that truth would die before it was spoken. But fear means you still have something worth protecting." From somewhere deep within the building came the low hum of a generator struggling back to life. A few ceiling lights flickered weakly, enough to cast faint shadows across the room. Alana Briggs entered, breathless. Her tablet screen glowed faintly. "Judge," she said, "the blackout is not complete. Backup networks are coming online through civilian relays. People across the country are re-uploading your speech. They recorded it before the cut." Maya turned to her, her face illuminated by the flickering light. "Then the truth has learned how to travel without permission." Yes, ma'am," Alana said. "It is everywhere now." Maya nodded once, her expression serene. "Then they failed." Heller's radio crackled faintly, static fighting through the noise. "Captain," a distant voice said, "public pressure is overwhelming the perimeter. They are calling it the night of the blackout. The entire nation is watching by candlelight, by phone light, by memory." He looked at Maya, waiting for instruction. "Let them watch," she said. "History is not written by power. It is written by witnesses." A sudden sound broke the quiet, a low rumble that shook the walls. At first it sounded like thunder, but it grew deeper, closer. Heller moved to the window and froze. "Judge, the people are moving toward the steps." Maya joined him, her eyes calm. The sea of lights outside was no longer still. It was rising, wave by wave. As thousands of people began walking forward, their lights lifted high. It was not violence. It was not chaos. It was collective proof of existence. "They are not storming the courthouse," Maya said softly. "They are surrounding it, protecting it." Heller swallowed hard. "Protecting you." "No," she said, her gaze never leaving the crowd. "Protecting what we began." The glow grew brighter, spreading out into the streets beyond. It reached the monuments, the bridges, the quiet corners of the city. Every light said the same thing: we are still here. And as the blackout continued, the power that had once lived in government halls began to hum again, this time inside the people who had learned they no longer needed permission to see. The city fell into darkness like a curtain being drawn over a stage. Streetlights flickered once, then went out entirely. Screens that had been streaming the broadcast only seconds earlier went black. Power grids failed one after another, plunging entire blocks of Washington into an unnatural silence. But silence was never empty. It was full of breath, of heartbeats, of fear. Outside the courthouse, the crowd stood motionless for a heartbeat before the first light appeared. A single phone flashlight, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. In moments, the plaza glowed with the soft, white shimmer of ordinary people refusing to disappear. They had no leader now, only conviction. Inside, Judge Maya Jefferson remained standing in the darkness of the chamber. The emergency backup generator had failed faster than expected. The air smelled faintly of dust and ozone. Captain Ross Heller's voice broke the silence. "Judge, we have lost all communications. The entire district is down." Maya's voice was calm but resolute. "Then we return to the oldest form of power presence." He frowned. "Presence, ma'am?" "Yes," she said, "the kind they cannot switch off." He turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the glow from the thousands of phone lights shimmered like stars reflecting off water. The sound of the crowd rose soft at first, then building into a rhythmic chant that rolled through the air like thunder. "We see you! We see you! We see you!" Maya stepped closer to the glass, her silhouette framed by the faint glow outside. For the first time since the ordeal began, she let her hand rest against the cold pane. The vibration of the voices below trembled through the glass into her palm. "They are not afraid anymore," she whispered. Heller looked at her. "And neither are you." "I have been afraid every day," she said quietly. "Afraid that truth would die before it was spoken. But fear means you still have something worth protecting." From somewhere deep within the building came the low hum of a generator struggling back to life. A few ceiling lights flickered weakly, enough to cast faint shadows across the room. Alana Briggs entered, breathless. Her tablet screen glowed faintly. "Judge," she said, "the blackout is not complete. Backup networks are coming online through civilian relays. People across the country are re-uploading your speech. They recorded it before the cut." Maya turned to her face illuminated by the flickering light. "Then the truth has learned how to travel without permission." Yes, ma'am," Alana said. "It is everywhere now." Maya nodded once, her expression serene. Then they failed. Heller's radio crackled faintly, static fighting through the noise. "Captain," a distant voice said, "public pressure is overwhelming the perimeter. They are calling it the night of the blackout. The entire nation is watching by candlelight, by phone light, by memory." He looked at Maya, waiting for instruction. "Let them watch," she said. "History is not written by power, it is written by witnesses." A sudden sound broke the quiet, a low rumble that shook the walls. At first it sounded like thunder, but it grew deeper, closer. Heller moved to the window and froze. "Judge, the people are moving toward the steps." Maya joined him, her eyes calm. The sea of lights outside was no longer still. It was rising, wave by wave, as thousands of people began walking forward, their lights lifted high. It was not violence. It was not chaos. It was collective proof of existence. "They are not storming the courthouse," Maya said softly. "They are surrounding it, protecting it." Heller swallowed hard. "Protecting you?" "No," she said, her gaze never leaving the crowd. "Protecting what we began." The glow grew brighter, spreading out into the streets beyond. It reached the monuments, the bridges, the quiet corners of the city. Every light said the same thing: we are still here. And as the blackout continued, the power that had once lived in government halls began to hum again, this time inside the people who had learned they no longer needed permission to see. Part 18. The Blackout, to 600 words. The city fell into darkness like a curtain being drawn over a stage. Streetlights flickered once, then went out entirely. Screens that had been streaming the broadcast only seconds earlier went black. Power grids failed one after another, plunging entire blocks of Washington into an unnatural silence. But silence was never empty. It was full of breath, of heartbeats, of fear. Outside the courthouse, the crowd stood motionless for a heartbeat before the first light appeared. A single phone flashlight, then another, then hundreds, then thousands. In moments, the plaza glowed with the soft, white shimmer of ordinary people refusing to disappear. They had no leader now, only conviction. Inside, Judge Maya Jefferson remained standing in the darkness of the chamber. The emergency backup generator had failed faster than expected. The air smelled faintly of dust and ozone. Captain Ross Heller's voice broke the silence. "Judge, we have lost all communications. The entire district is down." Maya's voice was calm but resolute. "Then we return to the oldest form of power presence." He frowned. "Presence, ma'am?" "Yes," she said, "the kind they cannot switch off." Ugh. He turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, The glow from the thousands of phone lights shimmered like stars reflecting off water. The sound of the crowd rose soft at first, then building into a rhythmic chant that rolled through the air like thunder. "We see you! We see you! We see you!" Maya stepped closer to the glass, her silhouette framed by the faint glow outside. For the first time since the ordeal began, she let her hand rest against the cold pane. The vibration of the voices below trembled through the glass into her palm. "They are not afraid anymore," she whispered. Heller looked at her. "And neither are you." "I have been afraid every day," she said quietly, "afraid that truth would die before it was spoken. But fear means you still have something worth protecting." From somewhere deep within the building came the low hum of a generator struggling back to life. A few ceiling lights flickered weakly, enough to cast faint shadows across the room. Alana Briggs entered, breathless. Her tablet screen glowed faintly. "Judge," she said, "the blackout is not complete. Backup networks are coming online through civilian relays. People across the country are re-uploading your speech. They recorded it before the cut." Maya turned to her face illuminated by the flickering light. "Then the truth has learned how to travel without permission." "Oh." "Yes, ma'am," Alana said. "It is everywhere now." Maya nodded once, her expression serene. "Then they failed." Heller's radio crackled faintly, static fighting through the noise. "Captain," a distant voice said, "public pressure is overwhelming the perimeter. They are calling it the night of the blackout. The entire nation is watching by candlelight, by phone light, by memory." He looked at Maya, waiting for instruction. "Let them watch," she said. "History is not written by power. It is written by witnesses." A sudden sound broke the quiet, a low rumble that shook the walls. At first it sounded like thunder, but it grew deeper, closer. Heller moved to the window and froze. "Judge, the people are moving toward the steps." Maya joined him, her eyes calm. The sea of lights outside was no longer still. It was rising, wave by wave, as thousands of people began walking forward, their lights lifted high. It was not violence. It was not chaos. It was collective proof of existence. "They are not storming the courthouse," Maya said softly. "They are surrounding it, protecting it." Heller swallowed hard. "Protecting you." "No," she said, her gaze never leaving the crowd. "Protecting what we began." The glow grew brighter, spreading out into the streets beyond. It reached the monuments, the bridges, the quiet corners of the city. Every light said the same thing: "We are still here." And as the blackout continued, the power that had once lived in government halls began to hum again, this time inside the people who had learned they no longer needed permission to see. The morning that followed, the blackout arrived without ceremony. There were no alarms, no fanfare, no breaking news music, only sunlight spilling quietly over a city that had not yet decided what it had become. The sky above Washington was pale gold, the kind of color that belonged to beginnings rather than endings. Judge Maya Jefferson stood at the top of the courthouse steps, looking out over the plaza that, only hours ago, had burned with the light of thousands of phones. Now it was calm. People were still their families, students, workers, elders, some holding candles burned down to stubs, others sitting silently with signs resting at their feet. They were waiting not for orders but for direction. Captain Ross Heller approached her side. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes red from fatigue, but his posture carried a strange peace. "The blackout is over," he said softly. "Power has been restored across the city. Communications are back online." Maya nodded. "And the files?" "They are still out there," he said. "Every news network in the country downloaded copies. The Department of Justice has called for a full review." "Ah, good," she said. "Truth should never vanish just because the lights do." A soft breeze moved through the plaza, carrying with it the faint murmur of conversation, gentle, respectful, alive. The chaos had given way to something quieter but more powerful: awareness. Alana Briggs appeared on the steps, holding a tablet. "Judge, the President has issued a statement. They are forming an independent commission to investigate systemic abuse across all enforcement divisions. They are calling it the Jefferson Inquiry." Maya turned to her slowly. "They are naming it after me?" Alana smiled faintly. "After what you made visible." Maya's eyes drifted back toward the crowd. "Then let them remember that visibility is not victory, it is responsibility." A young woman stepped out from the crowd below Elena Ruiz. She looked different now, steadier, her voice carrying a quiet strength. Judge Jefferson, she called out. What happens to us now? Maya walked down a few steps, close enough for her voice to carry. Now, she said, we begin the work that is harder than truth repair. The system will try to fix its image. We must fix its soul. Elena nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. You gave us back our voice. No, Maya said gently. You always had it. You just stopped whispering. The crowd stirred, some smiling, others crying softly. A boy near the front lifted a handmade sign that read in bold letters, "The people see." Maya looked at it for a long time, then raised her head toward the horizon where the sun was breaking fully over the city. Its light spilled across the courthouse facade, across the monuments, across the gathered faces, all illuminated equally, no shadows left to hide behind. Captain Heller's voice was low beside her. Do you think they will listen this time? They will, Maya said, because now they cannot pretend they did not hear. A single camera remained on, still streaming to the millions who had watched through the night. Maya turned toward it one last time. Justice is not an office, she said quietly. It is not a title, nor a uniform, nor a building of stone. Justice is the courage to look at what is wrong and still believe it can be right. That courage now belongs to you. She paused, letting the wind carry her words through the plaza. Hold it, use it, never let it sleep again. Then she stepped down the final stair and walked into the crowd, not as a judge, not as a symbol, but as one of them. The people parted, not to clear a path, but to walk with her. Together, they moved forward into the morning light, where the sound of chanting was replaced by the simple, steady rhythm of footsteps, thousands of them carrying the same truth forward. And as the sun rose higher over the reborn city, one thing became clear. The blackout had not ended the story of justice. It had only revealed where it truly began.